DFS Degenation. What is up? What is happening? We are back. Apologize for last week. We had some things come up. It was unfortunate, but we are back again, and we plan to be here for the rest of the season and all of the playoffs as well. So this week we are on to week 17, and this week is going to be kind of interesting week because you have a couple teams that don't really have anything to play for, but then there's a lot of games with a lot of stuff on the line, playoff positioning, teams trying to make it into the playoffs. So, I think this is a pretty solid week. I'm happy that this Titans game was not on the main, just mainly because of the players that we were worried about not playing, even though this game has actually turned out to be pretty decent in terms of fantasy production. But with this game, I think there's a few games that I think everybody's going to go to, right? The Bears and Lions game. It's in Detroit, Ford Field, the new Coors Field of the NFL here, where every single game this year has had a 60-plus point total on it, or it's went over 60-plus points so far this season. And, it's against the Bears. It's it's the highest total on the slate at 52. It's opened at a 48.5. It's already been went up 3.5 points from that time span. You also have the Packers game, which is up to a 48, opened up at a 44.5 point total as well. And, then you have some other teams that have some high implied point totals this week. The Chiefs, who have the second highest implied point total at 28.75 against the Broncos at home. You have the 49ers on the road against the Raiders, who are going to be facing Jarrett Stidham at quarterback with almost a 26 implied point total. The Eagles will have to monitor with. It looks like Jalen Hurts could possibly be back for this game. He did return to practice today. They're facing off against the Saints. You have the Jaguars, who the game doesn't really matter for them because of it doesn't matter if they win or lose this game. For them to get into the playoffs, it's next week against the Titans, so that game doesn't really matter. But overall, like Maddie, where are you coming in on this slate? Like, do you think this is? Is there? Do you think there's some sneaky ways you could go, or do you feel like it's pretty straightforward for you?
I do think there's some sneaky ways you can go because I think there's a couple passing attacks that could maybe go overlooked that are actually relatively cheap. And something that I've noticed that it keeps winning tournaments this year is a cheap stack that explodes. So like think back a couple weeks ago when Dallas and Jacksonville played, Trevor Lawrence was free. You pair him with Zay Jones, who was also free. That stack combines for 70 points right there. And you're able to fit in with the cheap stacks. You're able to fit in all the studs that are on the slate. So like you could have played, CeeDee Lamb on the other side of that game. You could have played Justin Jefferson that week or Tyreek Hill or whoever the big stud wide receiver was, along with the stack that went off. So I think there's a couple stacks that are cheap like that. And yes, Jared Goff is cheap, but I mean, if you're playing Jared Goff, you have to play Amon-Ra with him. And Amon-Ra is not cheap at all. He's almost 8K, 7.8. So that's not a free stack necessarily. There are free pieces to the Lions, like DeAndre Swift at 5.3K if Jamal Williams were to be out, which he's been, questionable with an injury. DeAndre Swift would definitely be a lock against Chicago, who does not play defense, run or pass. Chark is cheap. And Goff can always throw, a bomb touchdown to Jameson Williams. So there are some cheap pieces on the Lions, but really the main guy you would pair with Goff is Amon-Ra, and he's not cheap. So, that makes me think, okay, well, if I want to play, these guys like Justin Jefferson or maybe Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey, or even Travis Kelce, it's like, well, I need to find, some cheap stacks that I can fit these stud players with. And you look at it sounds really disgusting, but you look at Carson Wentz, who's going to get the start this week for Washington. And the Cleveland Browns they're not a great defense. And we've seen Carson Wentz, yes, he's looked bad, but he's been like a Jameis Winston kind of where he can put up fantasy production. And outside of Terry McLaurin, when Carson Wentz was playing in the early part of the year, he was throwing touchdowns to Dotson almost every week. Curtis Samuel was heavily involved, and those guys are 4.6K and 4.4K. So Carson Wentz at 5.1, Dotson at 4.6, and Samuel at 4.4. That is an absolute free stack that you can run, and you can even run it back on the other side with a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones, who has seen a 12-target game with Deshaun Watson. He's 4.7. So now all of a sudden, if that Washington Browns game just ends up like 27-24, you have a massive game stack there that is absolutely free. So yes, it's one of the lower total games of the week, but I still think we could see some decent fantasy production on both sides of the ball there. So I think that's an interesting one. And then the other one I want to mention is the Green Bay Minnesota game. Um, I think everybody's going to be on Cousins and Jefferson and all these guys that have been doing well. And Rodgers hasn't really had a good game yet this year from a fantasy perspective. But if there was ever a time, he's a 3.5-point favorite at home, second highest total game of the week. Minnesota is a pass funnel defense. We've targeted Minnesota with QBs all year. I mean, hell, even Mac Jones shredded them on Thanksgiving slate. So it's a spot where QBs that don't necessarily crush can crush Minnesota. And Aaron Jones is banged up. He's dealing with a shin injury, and yes, he's going to be playing, but they've been limiting his touches, and he hasn't been playing his full complement of snaps. And so if they can't really get anything going on the ground, I'm guessing Christian Watson's going to be out. So, I mean, again, it goes back to a cheap stack. Lazard's only 5.5K. Dobbs is 4.7. And you can load up this Green Bay passing attack with Rodgers, Lazard, and Dobbs for free. And you've got the easy run back on the other side in Justin Jefferson. So, or even Dalvin Cook, because Green Bay can't stop a nosebleed on the ground. So, yeah, I think there's really interesting ways to go on this slate outside of just Jared Goff. Who's obviously, I mean, Goff is yes, the best QB play on the slate, but if you're looking to be different in tournaments, I definitely think there's other ways to go.
Yeah, I agree. And Walito, appreciate the super chat. Degenation, happy to see you back. And Walito, I'm gonna need somebody for the Sunday show. Are you down? You wanna jump on the Sunday show with us? With me, I should say. Cody is out. He is out of town. Just thought I'd ask. I meant to DM you, but you're here, so I figured I'd ask. Anyways, so for me, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think Aaron Rodgers is a fantastic play at 6K. It's really pretty easy to stack with him, and if actually I think it helps with having Watson out because it's a little bit less consolidated or it's a little bit more consolidated, narrow path to targets for Lazard. I think it's better for Lazard to Christian Watson to be out. And then Dobbs has also been pretty heavily involved. So I think it's pretty easy to get there. Then you just run it back with, Jefferson or Hawkinson for that matter. I do agree. Obviously, I don't have to go into Jared Goff. He's such an easy person to talk about. I think Mike White is an incredible play at $5,400. I think you can stack him with Garrett Wilson. You can stack him with Elijah Moore. This offense is so much better with Mike White, and Seattle's pass defense has not been very good this year. They are currently 20th, and over the last 4 games, they are 20th in pass DVOA on the season. So I do like Mike White quite a bit here for the Jets. They are a team that's fighting for the playoffs. They definitely have something to play for. And so for that matter are the Seahawks, I guess, trying to kind of hold on here to get into a playoff spot there as well. So I do think that Mike White at $5,400 is a place you can get a little bit different. I like him. And then I do think that Tom Brady, I guess I'm just going to keep chasing it because I like to burn my money, I guess, because it sets up for an incredible matchup. And really, this is kind of for the playoffs for them, for both these teams, because whoever wins this is going to be in first in the division. And so this is kind of a playoff game here. And, over the last 4 games, both of these pass defenses have been dreadful. Over the past 4 games, Tampa Bay ranks 28th in pass DVOA, and the Carolina Panthers have been 29th in pass DVOA. On the flip side, it's complete pass funnels because they are elite against the run. The Panthers are number 2 in rush DVOA over the last 4 games, and the Bucks are 9th in rush DVOA over the last 4 weeks. And so I think that this is a spot where you can see a lot of passing here for both these teams. And I think it's an easy run back for me. I think you look at Tom Brady, you could go with Godwin, you could go with Kate Otten, you could go with one of the running backs. I you look at Leonard Fournette last week, saw 10 targets in that game against the Cardinals. And, I think if you want to, then you run it back with DJ Moore. And, DJ Moore has a great chemistry with Sam Darnold. I can't play Sam Darnold. But if you want to play Tom Brady at $6,100, he's going to carry no ownership. I get it. Like he's been bad. Like we keep chasing him and chasing him and chasing him and hoping it's going to play out. And it just really hasn't got there for the most part. I mean, his best game of the year came week 4 against the Chiefs. He did have 23 a couple weeks ago against Cincinnati, and that ugly game with all those turnovers that he had. But I do think in this spot, at home, a game that is likely, like I said, it's a playoff game. Basically, who wins this is going to be in first place. And so but if you want to get a little bit different, I think Tom Brady is something you could look at. And then I really want to play Trevor Lawrence. It just worries me that they just don't have anything to play for. I know Doug Peterson came out today and said that they're not resting anybody, that every game matters and all this stuff. And who knows? Is that coach speak? Is that just him talking? Because whether they win this or not doesn't matter. They have to win next week. And so how much are they going to be putting their guys on the line? Because Trevor Lawrence has been elite really since kind of like Thanksgiving, right? That right around Thanksgiving over the last month and a half of the season. I mean, he has games over his last 5 weeks of 28, 16, 36, 31, and 20 against the Jets. And so, but he's a great play, but like it's tough to trust them because are they going to really push it in this game when they don't really have to do a whole lot? You don't want to lose somebody to get hurt, much like we've seen the Titans do this week, and just say, hey, we're going to view this as a bye week for a lot of our players. But Trevor Lawrence, $6,200. He's a guy you can stack with Zay Jones. You can stack with Evan Ingram. You can stack him with really if you wanted to put Travis Etienne in that stack, you could do that as well. But he is risky because of that. As far as pay up options, like I definitely think Pat Mahomes is always in play just because of his incredible ceiling or incredible floor that he provides. I mean, he's really, I think, outside of 2 weeks all year, he's scored less than 19 fantasy points. Pretty much, he's been above 20 every single week, but he is expensive. He's $8,100, or excuse me, $8,500 for Patrick Mahomes. We saw this game play out a few weeks ago, and it was a high-scoring affair in that game against the Denver Broncos. But he still only put up 25 in that game. So I think you could do that, but Jalen Hurts could be the interesting one if he actually plays this week because he actually came back to a limited practice. He's $8,300 at home against the Saints. Now, it's not looking like it. I mean, the Cowboys are going to win this. Looks like pretty likely win this game, so it's not really going to matter. So they're going to have to win this week to really lock up everything that they want to lock up. And I guess they could still lose it to the Vikings. If the Vikings were to win out, but they basically have a 2-game lead because they have the tiebreaker over the Vikings. So I would assume that basically the Eagles would have to lose the next 2, and the Vikings would have to win out. I think for them to take that over. But overall, I think when it comes down to who I'm going to play the most, I'm definitely going to stack up this Bears game. But do you have any interest in Justin Fields on the other side of that game, considering how high of a ceiling that man has?
No, I think because if that game goes nuclear, it's Goff is going to be a big reason why. On the other side, and he's much cheaper. And I mean, I just paying down at QB has just been the move all year outside of like a week or two where Hurts and Fields and these running QBs have absolutely smashed. But the Lions have really shored up their run defense recently. And I know the running mobile QB is a little bit different than just defending the running game. But I don't know. I feel like that massive ceiling that we saw from Fields for that, 2-game stretch has come down a little bit because they've been a little more careful with letting him just run all over the place after he got hurt. So, but I mean, there's still upside there for the Bears to be able to do things through the air, especially like, I mean, if you are stacking Detroit, I do like running like Komet as a run back or something like that. I mean, so I definitely have interest in the Chicago side because you have to from a game stack perspective, but yeah, it's.
Oh, I'm just saying because the last time we saw these two teams play, and this was in Chicago as well, he put up 43 in that game, and he rushed for 147 yards because the Lions haven't been good against running quarterbacks. Like running quarterbacks have absolutely annihilated them.
Yeah,
it's been the running.
It's because they play a lot of man coverage, and so man coverage results in your defenders turn their backs to the QB and just man on the wide receiver, and it allows the QB to be able to get out of the pocket and do whatever they want to do pretty much. But
the thing with Fields is, I mean, he doesn't throw the ball a lot ever. Like, he's not going to go out there and throw for 300 yards. Like, this is not his thing.
Yeah. My thing is $8K. I mean, he has to get you 36 plus. I mean, because you're essentially looking for 4X to hit like tournament winning value, because that puts you on a 200-point pace. So I mean, at 8K, I mean, you're going to need the 36 to 40-point game from him for him to be, worth getting that. So I mean, if he gets you 28, 29, 30, you can probably get 25, 26, 27 from a cheaper QB this week. So yeah, it's definitely like, look, if he runs for 140 again, that's 17 points right there on the ground. Now let's say he throws for just 2 touchdowns. Now you're at 25 already without even adding in any yardage from passing. And then if he has a rushing TD, so let's say he throws for 150, there's 6 more, you're at 31, and he has a rushing TD that's 37. I mean, it's definitely possible. He can get you there, but he pretty much has to run for over 100 yards. If he gets you 80, it's not good enough. He's not going to throw for almost 300 and 3 touchdowns. So he's definitely playable. And if he's going to come in low owned, I definitely have interest.
Yeah. So I agree. I just think the ceiling is incredible with him. But he is expensive. It's not like, before where he was a little bit cheaper. Like in that Lions game week 10, he was $6,500, a little bit easier to swallow.
I mean, when you think about it, now that I think, like, just looking through the names, like, on this slate, can Mahomes break the slate anytime? Yeah. Is he likely to do it at home against Denver? No, because they're not likely to push him like they were able to do in Denver. Jalen Hurts is playing. If he plays, he's playing hurt. He still has a ceiling, but like, how much rushing upside do we see with this, like a separated shoulder that he's dealing with? Fields has a monster. He definitely has 40 plus ceiling. Herbert consistently gets you 25, doesn't have a 40-point ceiling. Tua is not playing. Cousins, no, doesn't have that ceiling. Lawrence, maybe. But like you said, like how much are they going to really want to push against Houston? Brady, no. Rodgers, no. Geno, no. Deshaun Watson, no. It's like Fields might be the only guy that can put the slate out of reach at QB. So while the path to doing it is like narrow, like there's only one way he can do it, and that's for running for 150. It's definitely possible, especially considering the style of defense that Detroit plays. Yeah, I like the call. I didn't really think of it in depth before we hopped on, but yeah, the more I think about it, I definitely do like Fields at 79. I've just narrowed in on the cheap QBs and didn't even really consider him till now.
Well, and we'll jump over here in a second because I do think there's actually a lot of value at running back this week. There's a couple guys that I'm in love with. But overall, like, I agree. I think there's a few guys in the sub 6K range that I really like. I already talked about Mike White. It's Mike White and Jared Goff. I think those are the two that stand out the most to me. Like, maybe you could make an argument for a couple others. Even Russell Wilson, who had his best game against the Chiefs, a few weeks ago, and really would have been even better had he not got hurt right there at the end of the game. But I'm not doing that. So I think that Mike White and Jared Goff make the most sense down there in the 6K range. It is Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. I think maybe a little bit of Kirk Cousins, and then if I'm paying up, I think it's Justin Fields. I agree with everything you said about Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's likely he's not going to go nuclear against the Broncos. They're not going to push him to that level to have to be able to do that. And so I don't think you see that from Patrick Mahomes. I think you see them kind of what they've kind of been doing is kind of coasting, and they're putting up enough points to beat you. And who knows what to expect? This Broncos team looks pretty fractured at this point of where they stand on things. But overall, I think that's kind of where I stand. Like Herbert, I just can't. I'm just not going to play him. They really have nothing to play for. They've got the division, or not the division. They have the playoffs locked up. They're playing the Rams. The Rams defense has been really good this year. They've actually kept them in games. It's just I don't see any reason to play the Chargers here in that matchup. And so other than that, like, I just don't see any path for these other games. Like, I think the games that I do like the most are the kind of the games that we've already talked about. The Lions game, the Bears, I think that just gets different. If the Lions, I think, is going to be super chalky, Jared Goff is going to be incredibly chalky. He is $5,600. Everybody's going to go to Jared Goff, and I don't think really a lot of people are going to go to to Justin Fields. So I just think that's pretty good leverage off of and still getting a lot of access to that game. I think you can still run obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark. You can game stack it without going golf. And I think it's just a different path of getting different. So if I'm paying up, I'm going to pay up for Justin Fields.
I agree.
All right, let's go ahead and jump over to running backs. And like I talked about, Christian McCaffrey, 9K. When the first thing came out, I was like, oh my goodness. They're facing the Raiders. The Raiders are terrible. And Christian McCaffrey could go absolutely nuclear. But I don't know if they're really going to do that now because there's Jarrett Stidham playing at quarterback. Like, there's just not a whole lot there that's going to push the 49ers. And so does Christian McCaffrey get this huge workload? I don't think so.
We've seen San Francisco kind of take the reins, like pull the reins back a little bit on him when they play with a huge lead. Like, they'll involve the second, third string running backs easily if they're up by multiple scores. And I mean, you have to think San Francisco has the best defense in the NFL facing a backup QB now. It's like, I mean, realistically, the game, I just don't see how that game stays close.
I don't either. And so I just can't. What I did like from him now, I just I don't have the same kind of interest. And then you have $8,500 Austin Eckler. Saquon Barkley is $8K. Josh Jacobs is $7,400. Nick Chubb is $73. James Conner is $7,200. We'll talk about that. Aaron Jones is $71. Dalvin Cook, I think, is too cheap at $7K. $6,900 David Montgomery. Get all the way the fuck out of here with that. No shot in hell. $6,900 Alvin Kamara, and then the rest of the 6K running backs are Ramondre Stevenson, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Cam Akers, and Jerick McKinnon wraps up the 6K. So if you're paying up here in this range, 6K and above, who you looking at?
Yeah, I have the same McCaffrey concerns that you do. I think Connor's interesting, assuming. Honestly, it doesn't even matter who plays QB, but Atlanta's been horrible against running backs. But assuming he plays, I think he's just been out with an illness this week from practice. So Connor's definitely interesting at 7-2. I just don't know if he has a ceiling to burn me, but I mean, he's heavily involved in the pass game now with these backup quarterbacks that just dump it off to him. And he's got all the touchdown equity in the world when they get in close because Kyler Murray's not there to steal it. So Connor's definitely interesting at 7-2 versus Atlanta. Dalvin Cook is absolutely in play against Green Bay. Green Bay can't stop anything on the ground. So if you're not playing Justin Jefferson, I definitely would consider Dalvin Cook. ETN 6.4K against Houston is absolutely in play. Like you said, that maybe they could mix in JaMychal Hasty a little bit more, but it's definitely a game they need to win. Because unlike Tennessee, there's like a 6% chance or whatever that Jacksonville could get in with a win this week and a loss next week. So like they have to have, all the scenarios have to fall their way, but I mean, it is there. And like, if they just folded this game because they were playing for week 18 and then all that scenarios happened and all they had to do was beat Houston to get in the playoffs, that would just be the worst thing in the world. So I don't think they're going to take this game, lightly. I think they do, maybe they take it lightly if they get up by 3 or 4 scores. But once they do that, I mean, Travis Etienne is probably a big reason that happens. So I think Etienne's safer, is a better play than the passing game here. So I definitely like him at 6.4K. I don't know if I'm going to chase the Cam Akers game from last week or not. I mean, it's an incredible matchup against the Chargers, but he has no pass game involvement. So I mean, he has to run for 100 plus and 2 scores to reach tournament value. So he's definitely in consideration. I just don't know that I'm going to end up there. And then McKinnon, I'll continue to have interest in McKinnon. He's going to continue to be the pass catching running back. He just nuked Denver a couple weeks ago. Now gets the same exact matchup, and Denver has been shredded by running backs the last few weeks, and Cam Akers just did it to them on Christmas. So he's definitely in play. Sliding down the list. DeAndre Swift at 5.3K. I absolutely have interest in him. at home against Chicago, especially if Jamal Williams is out. But even if he's not out, I definitely still like DeAndre Swift. He's still being involved. Like 5 targets, 9 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets the last 4 weeks. The carries haven't been there, but I mean he's still on the field, and he's actually outtouched Jamal Williams in the red zone, so he's getting high value touches too. And this is a really good matchup against Chicago at home. So I really like DeAndre Swift, and I think people could end up off of him this week just because of he hasn't really had a ceiling. But if there was ever a spot, it's definitely this one. Brian Robinson Jr. is interesting at home against Cleveland. Cleveland is another run defense that just cannot stop anything. And Antonio Gibson hasn't been practicing this week, so if he were to be out, then Gibson or Robinson Jr. is going to get all the run that he can handle, especially pass game work. So I would really like him at 5.2K in that game. The Jets running backs, Bam Knight, he's definitely in play at 5.1K. Seattle is just a funnel to pass catching running backs and tight ends. So Knight has been the lead guy in New York, and I expect that to continue. So he is definitely somebody that needs to be in consideration this week as well. And I'm seeing if I missed anyone. Oh, Allgaier for Atlanta. He's taken over as the lead back there in Atlanta. 18 carries and 5 targets last week. He's 5.3K. So I have interest in him as well at home against Arizona. So there's a lot of good running backs to play this week, and I don't think you need to pay up for McCaffrey. I'd rather pay up for like Justin Jefferson.
Okay, yeah. So you highlighted over some of the guys I really want to talk about. First, I want to talk about is James Conner. He is an elite play in my book at his price point. He is $7,200. He's on the cheaper side of the upper tier guys, and he has just been elite, really over the past like month and a half of the season. He has played very well in recent weeks. He is overall since week 10, he is 10th in attempts, he is 12th in rushing yards, but he is 7th in targets, 15th in receiving yards per game, and he's also first among all running backs over that same span in terms of touchdowns. He is 22nd yards after contact per attempt. Atlanta is not good against the run. They're 23rd in rush DVOA. They allow the 8th most rushing yards and the 15th most touchdowns, and they allow the 11th most schedule adjusted PPR points to running backs on the season. James Conner has played 90+% of the snaps in almost every single week since week 10. He is that backfield. Colt McCoy being back also helps, a little bit better option there at quarterback. But James Conner is just getting all the touches. He's $7,200. He has become the engine of that offense. He is going to be involved in the passing game, so there's no concern there. And so James Conner, I think, is an excellent spot at $7,200. As far as the cheaper running backs, Tyler Algier is the other guy that I was going to talk about. I am likely going to play a massive amount of Tyler Algier as well. I know it's in that same game, but the last 2 games for Tyler Algier, he is 17 carries, or he is averaging 17 carries per game, 128 total yards, 3 receptions per game, 1 touchdown, and he's averaging 19.5 PPR points per game over that span. And he's also 6th in yards after contact per attempt on the season. He's 3rd over the last 4 games. Arizona has been really bad against the run. 25th in rush DVOA. They allow the 5th most receiving yards and the 5th most receptions, 9th most touchdowns, and the most schedule adjusted PPR points per game to running backs. So Tyler Algier, like you said, he has taken over at this backfield, and a lot of it has to do with Caleb Huntley. He went to IR, so he is out of the way. And then Cordell Patterson has just kind of been a bum for the most part this year, and they're finally feeding Tyler Algier in a game that I'm not worried about, them falling behind, or the Arizona's just going to throttle them or anything like that. And so Tyler Algier at his current price at $5,300, considering his role, he played almost 60% of the snaps last week as well. It's just a really, really good spot for Tyler Algier. So if I'm going to pay down at running back, it's going to be to Tyler Algier, and I think it's going to align for him in a great spot here against the Arizona Cardinals. So I love Tyler Algier this week as a play. I think you can play Leonard Fournette at $5,600. We saw him kind of take back over this lead back, and with this being kind of a playoff game, I think he gets a lot of run. Last week he saw 20 carries. He also was targeted 10 times in that game. That's kind of been his bread and butter this year is the passing game. He only has 640 rushing yards on almost 180 attempts, but he has 400 receiving yards on the year. I mean, for this receiving opportunity has really what's kind of made him go. And again, this is a not a great matchup on the ground, but I do expect him to see a lot of targets. So $5,600 Leonard Fournette. I think we can look there. I agree with the Jerick McKinnon call. Travis Etienne would make a lot of sense, but I just don't know. It makes me a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit hesitant. He hasn't scored a touchdown since week 9, but he is seeing a lot of touches per. Over the last 2 weeks, he is handling 23 touches per game, averaging 93 total yards. Again, he just hasn't scored a touchdown. But the one thing I'll say is Houston's run defense has been better the last 4 games. They are actually 16th in rush DVOA over the last 4 games. Not great, but they have gotten a little bit better. Although they did just allow over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns to Derrick Henry, but that's kind of what Derrick Henry does to most people. But so if you want to go there, I don't hate it, but it just worries me a little bit with Travis Etienne and Houston, and playing Houston again, game not really mattering. Do you see more JaMychal Hasty, depending on how the game goes? So I think for me, my favorite plays is going to be James Conner. I do have interest in Saquon Barkley as well. This is the Giants need this game. Indianapolis looks just like they are just toast at this point. But Saquon Barkley, if I wanted to pay up in the top range, it would be Saquon. But I don't doubt I get there. It'd probably be James Conner. It's going to be Dalvin Cook. It's going to be Jerick McKinnon if I'm playing him in a stack or something like that. And then it's going to be, like I said, Tyler Algier down here at the bottom. I do think Zonovan Knight is interesting in terms of just overall, because if you look at his numbers the last 2 games, he's been terrible. He's been god awful the last 2 games. But that was also with Zach Wilson under center for some of that, and Zach Wilson we know is terrible. And Mike White likes to pepper the running back position. If you look at Zonovan Knight, the last 2 weeks, he has scored a whopping 2 each of the last 2 weeks, 2 DK points. But previous to that, he has been much better, and that was with Mike White. And like you mentioned, Seattle ranks 4th in rushing yards allowed. They've allowed the 5th most rushing touchdowns, the 7th most receptions, and the 3rd most receiving yards. And they have also allowed the 3rd most schedule adjusted PPR points to running backs. So this is a very good matchup for a running back here in this spot, like you kind of mentioned. And Zonovan Knight is only $5,100. So if you want to pay down further than that, I do agree with that. And then Brian Robinson, 100% agree on that call as well. Cleveland has been really bad against running backs, like you mentioned. They are 30th in rush DVOA, 7th most rushing yards, 3rd most rushing touchdowns, and the 5th most schedule adjusted PPR points to the position. So, and you have Brian Robinson. And this would be really good news if Antonio Gibson would be out, because then I think you could expect him to be a little bit more involved in the passing game as well. He's just not someone who does that. He averages 1 target per game. But without Antonio Gibson out there, I think then you could look to somebody like Brian Robinson to see a little bit more target share. But he's still seeing 16 carries per game in this matchup. So I do think Brian Robinson would also make a lot of sense, especially if Antonio Gibson were to be out.
I agree.
So for me, that's what I'm kind of doing at running back this week. Those are the guys that I really like the most. There might be a few other options. Like I've kind of like sniffed around AJ Dillon a little bit, but it feels a little like I don't love it. His touches have kind of been the same, but the problem has been, or not the problem. The good news has been he's finally scoring touchdowns, because before week 12, you had to go all the way back to week 1 for him to score a touchdown. Like he had just, but the production hasn't really changed all that much. In terms of how many touches he's seeing, he's still averaging right around 14 carries per game. He's seeing roughly around 3 targets per game, but it is a decent matchup against Minnesota. He's only $5,800, and this game at home, in Lambeau feels kind of like maybe like an AJ Dillon type of game, but I'm not going to trust it in a matchup against Minnesota. $5,800. It just feels a little bit too narrow for me. And then Cam Akers, I think there's going to be a lot of interest. A lot of people are going to chase Cam Akers after what he just did last week. And Cam Akers has been good. And it wasn't just last week that Cam Akers has been good. Like he's actually been playing pretty well over the last few weeks of the season anyways. Like if you look over the last 4 games, he is 6th in rushing yards, 8th in carries, but he's just not utilized at all in the passing game. But he has scored the most rushing touchdowns with 6 over the last 4 games as well. But he's 32nd in targets and 21st in reception among running backs. But much like I was talking about with the Texans, even though the Chargers are 28th in rush DVOA on the year, they're actually 17th in rush DVOA of the last 4 games. They have gotten better against the run, and they are starting to get a little bit better there. And we should see Joey Bosa actually return for this game as well, which is going to help that defense even more. Khalil Mack, and so I just don't know if I can trust Cam Akers in this spot here, and especially because he's so limited in terms of pass catching upside. I think that's a little bit more Kyron Williams, but game script has really gone in their favor recently. I think that's helped Cam Akers and being able to put up the points that he has because they've pretty much been in every single game they played, which is what's helped him, kind of become a little bit more fantasy relevant.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, we keep trying to attack these, run defenses that we said have been the worst in the NFL, but it seems like past couple of weeks it just hasn't worked out. Like I remember, Nick Chubb didn't even do anything against the Texans a couple of weeks ago, and it's like that was the first signal to me, that maybe we shouldn't just be jamming in these guys against the Texans anymore. When a guy like Nick Chubb can't even get going. So, yeah, I think recent production is big. Once we get down here to the end of the year. So,
yeah. For me, that's kind of the running backs that I have interested in. Is there anybody else that you want to talk about?
No, I think we covered most of them. There's a good chunk of them this week, but I think we covered them all.
Yeah. All right.
Definitely more running backs than passing attacks to play this week.
Yeah.
Low total games.
So let's talk about the wide receivers. You have Justin Jefferson at $9,500, and I'm not entirely sure that might still not be more expensive enough for how insane he's been, especially recently. Yeah. Then you have Tyreek Hill at $8,900. Devontae Adams, I'm not playing with Jarrett Stidham. Like if he burns me, he burns me. But I'm not doing that, especially against the 49ers at $8,500. A.J. Brown is $79. Amon-Ra St. Brown is $78. DeAndre Hopkins, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith and Keenan Allen wrap up the 7K range. And then the 6K range is DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett looks like he's going to return. Mike Evans, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, Chris Olave, who looks like he should return this week, Terry McLaurin, and Christian Kirk. And yeah, that's it. So if you're paying up at wide receiver, where are you looking to go?
Oh, it has to be Justin Jefferson. Like you said, I'm not sure 9.5K is enough for what he's been doing this year. He's pretty much what Cooper Kupp was last year, just regularly scoring 30 to 35 points, and some weeks are in the 40s. So, and it's funny, his biggest DK score on the year, it was against Green Bay in Week 1, where he had 9 for 184 and 2. And Jaire Alexander this week came out and said that was a fluke that Jeff put up those numbers against them, and that won't happen this week. So I'm sure Justin Jefferson has that stapled on the bulletin board in the locker room, that the Green Bay guys are saying that his production in Week 1 was a fluke. So yeah, I really like him at 95. I think people are going to shy away from Tyreek Hill at 89 with a backup quarterback, but in the 2 games that Teddy Bridgewater played as the main QB, was against Cincinnati and Minnesota. Tyreek had 14 and 15 targets in those 2 games, went for 160 and 177 yards. He just didn't have any touchdowns, but he still scored 29 and 33 DK points. So a man-heavy Patriots team, do not be afraid to play Tyreek Hill because Teddy Bridgewater is going to look at him over and over and over and over again. And he's 8.9K. So I am not opposed to playing Tyreek Hill at all this week. I'm not playing Devontae Adams with Stidham at QB. The Eagles guys, if Jalen Hurts plays, even if he doesn't play, I think the Eagles guys are interesting. Minshew is more than serviceable as a QB. And if they're going to go overlooked, they're at home. And that game kind of could turn into a little bit of a shootout, I think. We didn't talk about Andy Dalton, but Kamara might not play this week. He's been kind of like out of practice for personal reasons, and it seems like he's just kind of checked out from the team. It's like there's like very, there's no good reason as to why he's missing practice is the vibe that I'm getting. So it's like, I don't know. I just get the feeling he may not play this week. And so if that's the case, I mean, you get the ghost of David Johnson as RB2. It becomes RB1 because Mark Ingram, I'm pretty sure, is out still. And I wouldn't play David Johnson necessarily, but the Eagles are dealing with some injuries in their secondary now, and Dallas just hung 40 on them, and it was mainly because of the pass game. And I mean, I know New Orleans is on the road, but all you're asking for, if you were to play, like a Jalen Hurts or AJ Brown or a Devontae Smith, all you're asking for is the Saints be able to keep up. And I think Andy Dalton could, keep up a little bit with the Philly offense through the air because of those injuries that Philly has in the secondary now. And they may get Chris Olave back, who would be an explosive piece to that pass attack. And again, if they don't have Kamara and they have to run the ghost of David Johnson, I mean, that just leans more into pass game production. So I think that game is kind of sneaky. And I wouldn't just write off these Philly wide receivers, I guess is a long way to say that. I think Amon-Ra at 7.8 is too cheap against Chicago. If Detroit is going to have success through the air, it's always because of Amon-Ra. I think Goff just hits his ceiling with the guys like DJ Chark when he can hit those long, deep touchdowns or long passes down the field. So that's how he picks up chunk yardage and gets to the 350 or 400 yard totals. But even if you're not playing Goff, Amon-Ra can still hit a ceiling without Goff hitting a ceiling. So because he's so heavily involved in the reception category. So definitely like him. Jalen Waddle saw decent production with Teddy Bridgewater as well. In that Minnesota game that Teddy played, he had 10 targets, caught 6 of them for 129, put up 21 DK points. And he did not play, or he did play the Cincinnati game. He had a down game in that Cincinnati game, but he did have one good game with Teddy. So I wouldn't write off Waddle either. If those Miami guys are going to go overlooked because of Teddy Bridgewater, I'm definitely going to have interest in them. Moving down the list, Keenan Allen's interesting. He continues to just get absolutely peppered with targets. 14, 9, 14, and 14 over his last 4. And the Rams defenses, yes, they were good last week against Denver, but that's Denver. Prior to that, they've just been getting shredded by everybody. Keenan Allen's going to play the slot, so he stays away from Jalen Ramsey, who hasn't even been good this year. So it's not even really a talking point. But yeah, so Keenan Allen's definitely in play. Same with Mike Williams. I think he's in play. So even though we don't have interest in Justin Herbert, the Chargers receivers are still in play. And because this is week 17, I think we see guys that are in, on teams that have locked up playoff spots. I think they would sit next week. I think this week is more of a full go because you don't want to take too much time off, right? You still need to be in sync with everything that's going. And it seems like, the teams that do well in the playoffs every year just continue to ride the hot hand from the regular season into the playoffs. And it seems like the teams that, either rest their starters or have a bye tend to struggle right out of the gate in the playoffs. So I would be shocked if the Chargers just sat their guys like in the second half or something. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. You mentioned Tom Brady. I think, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are definitely in play. Like I said, Chris Olave is interesting if you're playing Philly guys. I already mentioned the Washington guys, Samuel and Dotson. I really like them for value. The Packers guys, I really like them for value. Lazard and Dobbs, and even Randall Cobb if you're playing Aaron Rodgers. Donovan Peoples-Jones at 4.7K is definitely in play. I know you'll probably mention Drake London. I just haven't played wide receivers against Arizona all year because they've only allowed one 100-yard receiver. But I mean, 4.9K, I guess he doesn't even really have to go for 100 yards. I mean, he had 7 for 96 and no touchdown last week, 16 points. I mean, I think that would be fine on this slate at 4.9K. Then if he gets you in the end zone, you're looking at over 20. So I think London's fine. He's not a guy that I don't think he's egregiously priced for his matchup. I think 4.9 is definitely fair. I'm not sure there's any really, really cheap guys that I want to play this week. Yeah, I think honestly, like the Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson realm, Romeo Dobbs, Peoples-Jones. Like I think that's the cheapest that I'll probably end up going. I'm not sure if you have any bottom of the barrel guys, but you can run through your list as well.
Oh, I agree with a lot of the players you already mentioned. No reason for me to double down on that, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, I 100% agree. Everybody's got to overlook Tyreek Hill because of it's Teddy Bridgewater, and I don't think it's that huge of a downgrade from Teddy Bridgewater to Tua. And we've already seen it. He gets peppered with targets still. But so I agree 100% with that. Um, Keenan Allen, 100%. Like the dude has just been the safety valve uh, for Justin Herbert over his last 4 games 14, 14, 9, and 14 targets for Keenan Allen. It's just ridiculous. So he's 100%. Chris Godwin, love him. He continues to kind of be the same thing for Tom Brady. 13, 13, 9, 8, and 10 targets for him. So, we're just trying to follow the targets. And, Mike Evans, like maybe he finally has a game. He also feels very chasey. He just hasn't done a whole lot this year. And it's mainly because he's not scoring touchdowns. Like, it's weird. He only has 3 touchdowns on the year. This is a guy that's usually a lock for 8 to 10 to 12 touchdowns every single year, and he just hasn't done it. Really, at $6,500, you want to take a shot on him? I don't hate it. But so once you get down here, like I already said, if Christian Watson were to miss, I'm going to like Allen Lazard. We saw him with 11 targets last week. I think a lot of that had to do with Christian Watson going out. I think Allen Lazard at $5,400 is exactly somebody that I would look to target. Zay Jones at $5K, we know how good he's been. He is pretty much getting the same exact opportunity as Christian Kirk is for the most part over the last month and a half of the season. Like target share, routes run, like it's almost identical between the two of them. He's just a lot cheaper. He's only $5K. And so I think you could look there. Darius Slayton at $4,900. I think you could look at him. Jahan Dotson, 100%. But I also think Jahan Dotson is going to be like 20, 25% owned. Everybody's going to play Jahan Dotson this week.
Dude, just play Curtis Samuel as a pivot. I'm telling you.
There's been this.
Carson Wentz loves Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, but there's the how well Jahan Dotson has played or recently. And Jahan Dotson's a baller. Like I think
he's
a
good,
very good wide receiver. And like
I agree.
Like he looks like a steal for the Commanders. Getting him. Obviously he was still a first round pick, but a lot of people like dunked on the Commanders for them taking him there and everything else. And he looks like he's a very good wide receiver, but he is also going to be really chalky at $4,600. And so I don't think you have to do it. I don't think you have to go there. I think there's other options like Romeo Doubs could be a better spot to get to within this $100 more, and DJ Chark, who's $4,300, is in a great spot. Richie James, sees a lot of targets, 12 targets last week for him, against Minnesota. But Richie James, I think in the slot could be a spot you could look at if you want to pay down. I still think that I don't like love it, but like Hunter Renfrow, if you wanted to at 4K, if you do look, I mean, the 49ers actually give up the 5th most DK points to wide receivers on the year. Just Jarrett Stidham's throwing him the fucking ball. So
yeah,
I probably won't get there, but he's still 4K. It's super, cheap for him. But if you're wanting to pay down, I think the options are, I think this is what we're looking at. McCole Hardman is supposed to be back this week. He's expected to return. He's practiced. Though he wasn't spotted at practice today, but all reports is that they said that he was supposed to return this week. He has been designated a return. They have to make a decision on him here soon, and so I do expect him to return. You could go with him. He's only $3,600. I think Terrace Marshall is also in play as well. They pretty much smashed the Lions last week. They did have to throw the ball. I don't expect that same type of situation here. We just talked about the Bucks and where they've been in the last 4 games. They have really struggled against opposing wide receivers. So Terrace Marshall, I think at his price tag of $3,600, he is kind of the deep threat here in this offense. Only saw 3 targets, but he did have 55 yards last week. He's kind of almost got there, in the last couple of games. 8.1 2 weeks before that, just because he's seeing the deep balls here in that offense. So I think if you wanted to, you could look at Terrace Marshall at his price tag, and then Elijah Moore at $3,500 is 100% in play with Mike White back. With he was starting to kind of really take off, and then Zach fucking Wilson started to come back and and fucked all this up. But Elijah Moore at $3,500 is a player who could see 8 to 10 targets here in this game against the Seattle Seahawks. So I do like Elijah Moore at $3,500. He is 100% in play for me. And then, other than that, like in terms of paying down, it's probably about as low as I would look to go. Those would be the options I would look at. And then, like I said, the other option, the guys you already talked about, I'm pretty much on board with. Oh, and DJ Moore. I don't know if we mentioned him, but he is 100% in play too with Sam Darnold. Since Sam Darnold's taken over, he's kind of got back going again. Scored 20.1 DK points last week, 18.3 the week before that, and he's still relatively cheap at $5,700. So again, if you're wanting to stack that, like I already talked about, that the Bucks game, or even a mini stack, DJ Moore at $5,700, I really like that spot for him as well.
Yeah, I don't hate the DJ Moore call. He would definitely be my Carolina run back if I was playing like a Brady or Evans team. Yeah, he's definitely interesting this week too.
Yeah, so I think for me that's kind of the wide receivers that I'm definitely looking at getting to this week. A lot of just game stack and then trying to some one off pieces here that we can look at. It's just like we already talked about a lot of these other guys, and like even Adam Thielen, I think could be in play. In a game stack environment, he's going to see anywhere from 5 to 8 targets in a game. He can find the end zone. It's just he's only $5,200. So because I think T.J. Hawkinson is going to be relatively chalky this week, especially coming off a huge game. And people, so if people wanted to get a little bit different, I think Adam Thielen could be the guy you could look at $5,200 against Green Bay. He's not going to see Jair Alexander either, and so Adam Thielen, I think is you could look at that as well. In terms of a game stack or something like that. So, if there's anybody else, we can jump over to tight end.
No, I'm good.
All right, so tight end, I just kind of talked about one of them, but Travis Kelce, $8,100. George Kittle has finally come to life over the last few weeks. Another big game last week, 33 DK points last week, 25 the week before that, but he is $5,900. TJ Hawkinson's $5,400 coming off of that monster 16 target game where he scored 38 last week, and then Dallas Goedert's 47, Tyler Higbee's 46. Cole Kmet's 45, Evan Ingram's 44, Darren Waller's 43, Gerald Everett $4,200, David Njoku is 41, Dulcich is 4K. So where are we going at? What are you doing at tight end this week?
I really like. I think Kmet's really interesting. I know he's 4,500, so he's priced up a little bit, but he continues to be the main guy for Fields, and with all the wide receiver injuries they've had. I think if Fields is going to hit his ceiling, or if the Bears are going to keep pace through the air, I think Kmet's a big reason why. 6'5", 7'6" targets over the last 4. Just hasn't gotten into the end zone, which when he went on that run those 3 weeks where he put up 9, 22, and 23, he scored 5 touchdowns in 3 games. So the touchdown equity can be there. He just hasn't scored a touchdown in like 6 weeks. So I think he's due for a touchdown. It's a good spot against Detroit, where tight ends have had success. If you're playing Trevor Lawrence, Evan Ingram is a guy that I will always attach to Trevor Lawrence, just because his target ceiling can be through the roof in games that they throw a lot. We've seen him with target counts of 8, 10, 15 against Tennessee, and 7 over the last 4. So he's another guy that has been heavily involved for their offense. Outside of that, I mean, I've played Mahomes and Kelce a couple times this year together, and it's like, the more I think about it, they cost so much when you play them together. And even Kelce by himself, like $8K for a tight end. And like, if he gets you 28, I mean, yes, he's definitely the highest scoring tight end on the slate. But I mean, there's going to be weeks where, like Hawkinson last week, or Hawkinson against Indianapolis, or whatever it was, where he broke the slate. I can't remember. I think it was last week. And Kelce got like 20 on the dot. And it's like, your Kelce teams don't even sniff the Hawkinson teams because he costs so much less, and he outscored him. So if you can, get a cheaper tight end that can come remotely close to 20 points, I just think that's such a better use of salary than hoping Travis Kelce gets you 28 points at 8K. I mean, 8K doesn't even, like, 28 points at 8K doesn't even really do much for me. And when you pair him with Mahomes too, I mean, that's almost half your salary that you're freaking using. It's almost 17K of salary. So it's pretty much a third of your salary that you're using on 2 players, and one of them's a tight end. I just really struggle paying that price for Kelsey these days. So I think I'm gonna. While it is a good matchup against Denver because you can't attack Denver with tight ends, I just think I'm gonna end up paying down. And I really like Kittle anytime that Deebo Samuel is out, but like we mentioned, how does the Raiders keep pace in this game to the point where Purdy has to keep throwing the ball, and the San Francisco should just be able to run all over them. So like I just don't know what kind of volume Kittle's going to see. And sure, he can be a reason that they crush early. Because like last week they won 37-20, had 8 targets, caught 6 for 120 and 2 scores. So I mean it's definitely possible, but it's almost 6K. I mean he pretty much, you're starting to get into the range where he has to go for almost 100 yards or catch 2 touchdowns. So I'm probably out on Kittle, and I'm probably going to play one of the cheaper, 4K tight ends, and then mixing down a little bit less. I think at some point Trey McBride can end up exploding, and this is a good spot for him. 3.3K in that Arizona Atlanta game in the Dome with Colt McCoy, who should be back this week, who's a much better quarterback option for them and for Trey McBride. So I think he's interesting. He won the tight end award in college last year, had over 1,100 receiving yards. So he's definitely a really good pass catcher. He just hasn't seen the volume yet for it, but I think he could definitely end up paying off that 3.3K salary. I mean, Juwan Johnson just caught 2 touchdowns against Atlanta recently.
So for me, one you didn't mention was Tyler Conklin. He's $2,900.
Yep.
He is. This is a great matchup. Obviously, Seattle is terrible against tight ends. They allow the second most DK points, and it's just barely right behind Arizona. So it is a great spot for him. And he's still playing a lot of snaps, for roughly around 70% of the snaps for the most part on the year. He's still running a lot of routes. Last week he ran 25 routes. Last week targeted 4 dime against Jacksonville. So he's actually 6th among all tight ends this year in routes run. So I think Conklin, especially at $2,900 for a player who is has 77 targets this year, is averaging roughly 5 targets per game at $2,900 in a smash spot. Like I'm going to play a lot of Tyler Conklin, especially at his price, and so I like him as definitely a different option. I think he also Greg Dulcich, if he's able to play, though he did not practice today, so we'll have to monitor that. But if he did play at 4K and in this game against the Chiefs, I would have interest there. But other than that, the guys you mentioned are the guys that I definitely would have interest in as well.
How many snaps has Uzomah been playing for New York? Because I remember there was a game recently where he had like a solid game and stole a touchdown or something, and I wasn't on Conklin, but I just remember seeing Uzomah score and was like, why isn't Conklin the one that's scoring the touchdown? But I haven't looked into the snap share on them, but I do agree, the Jets, especially with Mike White back at QB.
So he plays he plays a decent amount of snaps. Just over the last 4 games, 44, 42, 54, and 45. But he's not running any routes.
Okay, so he's been mainly blocking.
Yes.
So he's probably getting like 1 to 2 targets a game.
He's basically running about 10 routes per game.
And what's Conklin been running? Probably like 20 to 25.
Let's see. Last 4 weeks he ran 36 routes, 40 routes.
Jesus. Okay.
17 and 25.
Okay.
And then one of those games was the where they got absolutely.
Yeah, because Seattle they really limit wide receiver production. I mean, we've seen it all year. I don't even know that they've allowed a single 100-yard receiver yet. They funnel everything to running backs and tight ends. So yeah, I mean Conklin at 2,900 makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So I like him quite a bit. And he's just incredibly cheap. I think he's kind of opens things up a little bit. So
yeah, definitely like that.
So I think, like I said, I'm not really gonna, the other tight ends. I think that you've already that you already mentioned are the guys. I like those guys too. So if you have anybody else, we can jump over to defense.
No, yeah, I'm good to hop.
All right. So what cheap defense are we playing this week?
I like the Packers at 2,300 at home against primetime Kirk Cousins. I know it's not primetime, but 4:30 is definitely game of the week status to where Kirk Cousins is on the road in Lambeau. He can definitely shit his pants a little bit there, I think. I definitely like them. And then we mentioned that we like Tyreek in them, but New England at home, 2,600 against Teddy Bridgewater. I'm definitely in for that as well.
I also think the Panthers are a little bit in play too, with as much as Tom Brady's been turning the football over lately.
For sure.
He's only $2,400. Their
They
offensive
have a
line
solid
is completely made
defense.
up.
Their
Yes.
defense has been solid this year.
Yeah. So I don't mind the Panthers at $2,400 if you wanted to do that. And then, somebody like the Falcons, I think they're cheaping up at $2,700. The Jets at $2,800 for sure. Geno Smith does not look as good as he did early in the year, especially as of recently. So Jets at $2,800, I think, is also a spot we can look to get to too.
Yeah, there's some solid home team defenses this week that are cheap. So I would definitely side with a home defense this week.
You know who's going to be chalky though? You know who's going to be the chalk?
Who?
The one that I don't get. The 49ers are $2,900.
Oh God, I didn't even realize they were that cheap.
They're the best defense in the league. Why?
Yeah. Jesus.
Even if Derek Carr was playing, why are they $2,900?
I honestly didn't even scroll up because I stopped at. I saw the Packers 23 and Patriots 26. I was like, okay, well, I don't need to scroll up any higher than this. Jeez,
the Eagles are $4K. The Giants are $3,900. The Chiefs are $3,800. The Chargers are $37. The Jaguars are $36. Like I don't even like some of these I don't even quite get. Like the Browns are $3,400. The Colts are $3,300. All these teams are more expensive than the 49ers, who are $2,900.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna play the 49ers. To be honest,
with Jarrett fucking Stidham at quarterback.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm playing the 49ers. I honestly didn't even see their price.
Just wild. Like, what are we doing, DK? How did you get there?
That's egregious. Sometimes you just play the plays, and that's the play there.
It's not even like I could see if it was like the Bengals or the Bills or the Chiefs, like one of like the elite, truly elite offenses. Like, okay, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to price them down because of that. But they're playing the goddamn Raiders.
Yeah, Derek Carr, right?
Like,
which ends up not being Derek Carr.
Yeah, and so 49ers, $2,900. Let's just lock that in.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm sold. No, we don't need to do it. We don't need to cover any more defense.
All right. Well, actually, so this is the time we go ahead and build a lineup, and I just already locked in the 49ers to this lineup at $2,900. So we build a lineup every single week, and so Maddie, we already got the 49ers in. So where are we going next?
Well, we covered the very bottom of the lineup. Let's cover the very top of the lineup. Let's go with Justin Fields. Let's see what kind of Fields team we can build.
All right. Well, I'm going to go Amon-Ra St. Brown.
All right. Let's go Komet.
Do I want to get one more Lion in there? And put in Chark. Hold on.
What's he, 43? Yep. Okay.
Actually, I'm going to go with my guy. I'm going to go with Tyler Algier at $5,300.
All right.
That leaves $5,400 remaining for a running back, 2 wide receivers, and a flex.
Let's go with Swift.
Oh.
5,300. That is so cheap for DeAndre Swift. Jesus Christ.
I will mention. So at first I was gonna like Jamal Williams a lot more, but he's not. He's practiced. Like he's not missed any time. And he's not even listed on the Week 17 injury report. So like Jamal Williams is 100% playing.
I know, but Swift has actually been getting more of the red zone touches recently. He just hasn't done anything with them yet.
I know, but he's so damn risky in my mind. Like
he is definitely, but that's why he's priced at 5.3.
No, that's true. Let's So then I'm gonna do something else. I'm at the flex because I kind of want to mini this game, and I'm gonna go Dalvin Cook.
All right. Let's try to fit Lazard then.
Should be able to. We saw 46.5. Lazard. Where's he at?
If not, then we can do.
54.
Let's do Dobbs. Because then we can play one of those 4K receivers. Yeah, let's just do Dobbs.
Is Julio Jones going to play? He's back at a limited practice. Then again, he played last week and he still only saw one target. Because I was going to say Russell Gage would be a good play too. He was targeted another 6 times last week. So I was going to say we could stay with Lazard if we could, or we could go
play Randall Cobb.
You could do that, or we could go with Elijah Moore at $3,500.
I just don't like receivers against Seattle.
Let's see what different we could get to with Dobbs.
With Dobbs, you can play like Curtis Samuel or Dotson or Chark.
47, so at least 46.
Yeah.
Of course, we're sitting there right on John Dotson.
You can pivot to Curtis Samuel. He's 44. He had weeks 1 and 2 with Wentz. Weeks 1, 2, and 3, 11, 9, and 10 targets. He scored 20, 23, and 13 DK points those weeks. I don't know what week Wentz got benched, or hurt, whichever it was. But all of Curtis Samuel's targets came earlier in the year. And then Heineke switched over to Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, you know what? I'll go Curtis Samuel. I'm fine with that. Leverage off of extremely chalky Jahan Dotson.
Yeah.
In that same range. Okay, I like that. So we have Justin Fields, Tyler Algier, DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Romeo Dobbs, Curtis Samuel, Cole Kmet, Dalvin Cook, and 49ers D. $200 remaining. If you wanted to do something a little bit different, I think you could switch out of Swift. You could actually go to DJ Chark, and it'd give you up to about $5,600, somewhere right around there, where you could go like a Leonard Fournette option would be available to you, or one of the Jets running backs or something like that, or Brian Robinson, something else we talked about is too at $5,200.
Yep.
So there's other options here if you want to get a little bit different with this build and make it a little bit different. So, but I do like this team overall. I think it's a really solid spot. We're kind of targeting the 2 favorite games. We got different with going Fields instead of Jared Goff here, running it with Cole Kmet. So I do like that. And then the mini with the Minnesota and Green Bay game. So I think there's a lot of upside here with this lineup. So we're going to lock this one in. So got this locked in. Week 17 is now in the books. And, week 18 is the worst week of the year to play.
Yeah.
Because there's so much shit that happens. So many different teams that are sitting players or how, or a team may only play players for the first half, the first quarter.
And the players that are playing end up being bad players.
Yeah, so it's a lot of information watching. It's a lot of just playing the games that matter and the games that like actually mean something for teams, and just avoiding everything else. But you know what? Then right after that, we get the greatest stretch, and we get fantasy or NFL playoff DFS, which I absolutely love, and I think we've done really well the last 2 or 3 years with the NFL playoffs DFS. So I am looking forward to that because the slate of games looks like it could be pretty nice. I just hope, because I remember talking about it, because I remember now that they're playing a Monday night game. They've added the Monday night game into this, and so I could see DK just like neutering the wild card slate. I hope they don't, but because we were worried about that before. Were they going to make it to where it's like Saturday only, Sunday only, where the main slates for it, and then Monday would be showdown? I hope they don't do that. I hope they make it Saturday, Sunday, main slate, and then you can have your Saturday only slate, your Sunday only slate, but they better make, because it really waters it down, because it only gives you like 3 games per, and it's just so much better. You get all that late swap, or that the swap over the next day, trying to make changes and stuff like that. So I just think there's a lot more strategy to it whenever it's Saturday and Sunday versus just the one day.
Yeah, I agree.
So, anyways, I appreciate everybody rocking with us all year. It's been a lot of fun.
Good luck in championship week.
Yeah, if people are playing their fantasy football championships in their home leagues, hope everybody wins there. Let's win some money this weekend. I think it's a pretty interesting slate to attack. Just getting a little bit different, getting a little bit leverage, different places. So I do like all that. So keep it locked in here. We will be back again next week for week 18. The goodness that it will be. Hopefully, there's not a ton of just players missing, but we'll see what happens. We'll be back with all that news and everything else. Keep it locked in here. We're not going anywhere. We'll be here all the way through the Super Bowl. So hope everybody has a good weekend. Hope everybody has a safe weekend. I forgot this is New Year's Eve weekend. So, if you're gonna go out and you're gonna tie one on, you're gonna get fucked up, hey, do your thing, boo-boo. But just take an Uber or something like that. Or spend the night somewhere. Let's not drink and drive or do anything like that. Want to hear from everybody from there. So, anyways, have a good weekend. Let's win some money. We'll talk to you guys again next week.